Hello everyone, I'm Gitanjali Atri, a research scholar at the School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University. And today we are going to discuss the course for MGP 002, Philosophies of Mahatma Gandhi, in which we would be covering the first 4 units. So now let's begin with the unit number 1, which is Indic religions, Hinduism, Jainism and Buddhism. Let's begin by discussing Gandhi and his relationship with the religion of Hinduism. So Gandhi was a strong believer in Hinduism, which he liked to call as the Sanatan Dharma, which is the eternal religion. Hinduism, in his conception, was no narrow creed. In fact, it was a grand evolutionary process, as ancient as time itself, which is why he liked to call it as Sanatana, which is eternal. Eternal has a quality of speciality to it. It means that it was theirs ever since the time immemorial, and which is why he believed that his faith, the faith of Hinduism, was Sanatan Dharma. And he embraces the teachings of Zoroaster, Moses, Christ, Muhammad, Nanak and all other prophets within Hinduism itself. So for Gandhi, Hinduism was an overarching religion which contained the teachings and philosophies of all the great teachers of the time. Gandhi defined a Hindu as the one who believes in God, immortality of the soul, transmigration, law of karma and moksha. He also believed that a Hindu is one who practices truth and ahimsa in daily life, cow protection in its widest sense, and tries to act according to the laws of Varna Ashrama. Gandhi called Gita as his spiritual dictionary. He believed that Gita as a religious text never failed him in his moments of distress. Whenever he had any problem related to politics, related to society, or any problem, he went back to Bhagavad Gita. His faith in Bhagavad Gita was so strong that he in fact also translated it in Gujarati. He also found that Bhagavad Gita was free from sectarianism and other social dogmas which corrupted the society of Gandhi's time. He also believed that Bhagavad Gita had a universal appeal. Also, the characters in the Hindu epics influenced Gandhi a lot. For instance, he saw a play on the life of Harishchandra when he was a small kid. And since then, the life of Harishchandra captured his heart. He often used to think that why not everyone always speak the truth the way Harishchandra always did. He asks, why not be truthful like Harishchandra? He also quotes the example of Rama and Pandavas, who kept their words by undergoing all difficulty. He often also cites the example of Prahlad, Sudama, Dhruv and Shravana, who gave up all worldly comforts for the sake of virtues and principles for which they lived. Of Mahabharata, Gandhi says that it is like a rich diamond mine, from which the deeper one dig, the more diamonds one could find. He was of the opinion that the burden of Ramayana and Mahabharata is to teach ahimsa. He has repeatedly said that both these epics tell the story of the victory of good over the evil. But on the flip side, regarding Hinduism, Gandhi's views were also iconoclastic and rebellious. He understood the Shastras from the point of view of dharma. According to him, it is possible to attain moksha or salvation even without reading the text. He also said that the Shastras are not above reason, and any Shastra which does not fit the arguments of logic, the arguments of reason, should be rejected. Gandhi also had his own views on Varna Ashrama. He believed that there are no more than four Varnas. He believed that one acquired the caste by birth. And even though one acquires the qualities and characters of other Varna, the body of an individual does not cease to belong to the particular Varna in which it was born. He expressed his desire to cleanse the Hinduism of the caste distinction, because he believed that Hinduism had sinned itself by giving sanction to untouchability. Now, moving further, let us discuss another subsection within the unit, which is Gandhi and Jainism. So, Gandhi acknowledges the influence of Jainism in his upbringing and subsequent character, subsequent career, and his entire outlook, which he believes was molded by the tenets of Jainism. Porbandar, where Gandhi was born, was a state in Gujarat where he received his early education. And this particular state within Gujarat had a significant Jain population which had a great influence on young Gandhi. So, for instance, the first influence of Gandhi was that of his mother, who often used to take up fasting for self-purification, even though they were not Jains by their religious affiliation. Fasting, which is essentially an all-religious practice, had acquired a flavor of Jainism in Gujarat particularly, and it had an influence on Gandhi. Just as the tenets of Jainism preach fasting for self-purification, the Gandhi in future would also do the same for the similar purpose, not to pressurize or influence other, but for the purpose of self-purification. And this is what he would also preach to his own followers, to practice self-restraint. And the first step that he preached in that regard would be the step of fasting. Gandhi also followed the asceticism as enjoined by the tenets of Jainism, though he did not accept people calling him an ascetic. His concept of simple living and high thinking is the one prescribed by the Jain religion itself. For the inmates of Sabarmati Ashram also, he prescribed 11 vows, out of which many are the vows of Jainism, like truth, non-violence, non-stealing, brahmacharya, and non-possession. Now, one of the aspects for which Gandhi dedicated his entire life was the aspect of ahimsa, the practice of non-violence, and that too comes from the tenets of Jainism itself. Ahimsa for Gandhi was not just a means or a way of life, but a creed and a religion and a philosophy of life for which he dedicated his entire life. Now, for instance, when the civil obedience movement turned violent in a village called Chauri Chaura, Gandhi withdrew the entire movement and stated that the people of the country were not yet ready for the principles of non-violence, but the movement should be resumed once the country gets ready for it. Gandhi defined non-violence in different contexts and circumstances, and some of them are inspired by the Jain thought process itself. For example, he said non-violence is a law of suffering. It is not a weapon of the weak. And as long as physical existence is there, perfect non-violence cannot be practiced. In his idea of non-violence, he propagated a goodwill for all forms of life. Violence, in his understanding, was not even permissible towards snakes or scorpions or other poisonous creatures. If Gandhi did not take an extreme stand on any issue, one may say that it was again a result of his inherent Jain values of Anekantavad, which does not take a rigid stand on any issue. The philosophy of Anekantavad within Jainism aims at approaching the truth with humility. and with respect to the opinion of the others. So, for example, when someone pointed out the contradiction between two statements made by Gandhiji, he always used to say that pick up the later statement, because the former statement was made according to the situations which existed earlier. And right now, when the contradiction is being pointed out, the later statement standed closer to the truth. The later statement stood closer to the truth. Also, Gandhi's theory of karma comes close to Jain perception. In Jainism, karma is both the cause and the effect. Karma is a cause for getting the past corrected and also necessary for future, so that good deeds lead to good happenings in future, as per the belief of Mahatma Gandhi. Now let's move to another subsection within the unit, which is Gandhi and Buddhism. Gandhi considered all the great religious leaders as great teachers. According to him, Buddha, Jesus and Muhammad, they were all warriors of peace in their own style, and one should enrich the heritage left by these world teachers. At a speech delivered during a public meeting in Tongo, Burma in 1929, he said, and I quote, "Gautama himself, when he saw oppression, injustice and death around him, and when he saw darkness in front of him, at the back of him, on each side of him, went out in the wilderness and remained there, praying and fasting in the search of light." Quote closed. In another speech delivered as a response to Buddhist address in Colombo in 1927, he said that the essential part of the teachings of Buddha now forms an integral part of Hinduism itself. It is impossible for Hindu India today to retrace her steps and go behind the great transformation, reformation that Gautama effected within Hinduism. Gautama was himself a Hindu of Hindus, according to Mahatma Gandhi. He was saturated with the best that was there within Hinduism, and he gave his life to some of the teachings that were buried in Vedas and which were overgrown with weeds, believed Mahatma Gandhi. Buddha never rejected Hinduism, Mahatma Gandhi believed, but he broadened its base. He gave it a new life and a new interpretation. So that would be all from the first unit. Now let us move on to the second unit, which is the Semitic religions, Judaism, Christianity and Islam. So Gandhi was very much impressed with the Semitic religions. Even though he did not have much contact with Judaism, he says that Jesus Christ and Muhammad are world teachers, and was highly impressed by the book Sermon on the Mount, which he says transformed him. He included the Christian and Islamic worship within the Sabarmati Ashram prayers. Now let us move on to the first subsection within the unit, which is Gandhi and Christianity. Gandhi's interaction with Christianity has been long and fruitful, though he was repelled by it when he was in the school. Even a local conversion to Christianity created a bad impression on young Gandhi. But when he went to England, he met a Christian from Manchester, and he narrated his bitter experience with the Christianity religion to that person. And it was then that that man gave him a copy of Bible, and Gandhi started reading the Old Testament. But it was the New Testament which impressed Gandhi more. He read Sermon on the Mount, which he says went straight into his heart. He further says that he compared the New Testament with Bhagavad Gita. Several verses within the book delighted Gandhi beyond measure. His young mind even tried to unify the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, the Light of Asia, and the Sermon on the Mount. The renunciation was the highest form of religion. This is what Gandhi learnt through his readings of the books within Christianity. On the other hand, however, Gandhi emphasized that prayer is important, but he held that congregational worship, as it is practiced within Christianity, is not a true form of religion. Gandhi said that Jesus was a prince among politicians, a prince among passive resistors. Now moving on to another subsection, which is Gandhi and Islam. Gandhi included the kalimas as they were taught within Islam in the ashram prayers, despite the fact that it brought out an angry reaction from many of his Hindu friends. But Mahatma Gandhi was confident that there should be in us an equal reverence for all the religions. Referring to Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, he often used to say that whenever Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan used to join the worship at the Sabarmati ashram, he did it with a great delight. He loved the tune to which Ramayana was sung. He listened intently to Bhagavad Gita. His faith in Islam did not stop him from doing all of this. It was not lessened by his acts of indulging in Hindu forms of religion. Then why may a Hindu not listen to Quran with equal reverence? Asked Gandhi, and with equal adoration in his heart. So this would be all from the second unit. Now let us move to the third unit, which is Western philosophy, in which various influences on Gandhi from within the Western philosophy would be studied, in which we would deal with the Greek tradition, John Ruskin, Leo Tolstoy and Thoreau. Gandhi studied the Western authors of his interest right from Socrates and Plato. But a few thinkers who had compassion for the mankind attracted his attention the most. And today we would discuss them in detail. So for example, from the Greek tradition, Socrates appealed to Mahatma Gandhi as a satyagrahi. Plato's conception of education is seen in his approach to education also, where he stresses the right to basic education of all the individuals. John Ruskin, an eminent British art and architecture critic, influenced Mahatma Gandhi and his philosophy. Gandhi especially held Ruskin in great esteem for his book Unto This Last. Of all the books Gandhi said that he had read, this was one book which brought out an instantaneous and a practical transformation in his life. Gandhi even translated it later into Gujarati and called it Sarvodaya, which means the welfare of all. In this book, Gandhi summarizes Ruskin's idea in three main lessons. 1. The good of the individual is contained in the good of all. Second, that a lawyer's work has the same value as that of a barber's, inasmuch as all have the same right to earning their livelihood from their work. And third, that the life of a labor, that is life of the tiller of a soil, and the life of a handicraftsman is worth living. Also, Gandhi adapts Ruskin to the Indian context for his anti-industrial, pro-labor, pro-community ways and redefines Ruskin values in the Indian rural context. Ruskin's concern is up to the last man, and Gandhi's Sarvodaya means the welfare of all. Difference only is in the sequential aspect, but spiritually the two are absolutely the same. Elizabeth T. McCollin, in her scholarly work Ruskin and Gandhi, says that Ruskin can be easily called the father of Gandhian economic thought. McLaughlin states that Ruskin influenced Gandhi's conception of soul force as a substitute for physical force. He was the chief source for Gandhian economic ideas, and above all, he changed Gandhi as a person. This is far more than an exerting influence. The suddenness of the change that Ruskin and his ideas brought within Gandhi was similar to an instantaneous religious conversion, as Gandhi himself points out in his autobiography. Similarly, Leo Tolstoy, a Russian thinker, and his philosophies of social and divine conception of life, universal sympathy and love, rejection of force and violence in all forms, rejection of private property, and the principle of non-violence had a major impact on Mahatma Gandhi. But the influence of American anarchist H.T. Thoreau remains the most debated one when it comes to his influence over Mahatma Gandhi. Why? Because on one hand, the Western writers commenting upon the influence of Thoreau over Gandhi like to believe that Gandhi's practices of civil disobedience were influenced by Thoreau. On the other hand, Gandhi himself denies any such influences in his autobiography, though not completely. Gandhi, in many of his letters, makes it clear that he had adopted the method of civil disobedience even before he read Thoreau. But after reading Thoreau, his ideas were underlined, fortified, and justified, and his belief in non-violence became even more entrenched. So this would be all from the third unit. Now let us move on to unit number 4, which is Eastern philosophy. In this we would discuss the influence of Vedanta, Bhakti movement, Kabir, Tulsidas, Vaishnavism and Anasakti yoga on Mahatma Gandhi. So after his early Western education, Mahatma Gandhi started facing a lot of crisis after crisis in his political life. And this is what made him turn towards religion for solace. Even though Hinduism was deeply enshrined in his mind, he had no hesitation in exploring further the tenets of several other religions. Within Hinduism, the Vedic literature, including the Upanishads, the Vedantas, Brahma Sutras of Vyas, Advaita Vedanta, and the theory of Vishishta Dvaita and Dvaita had a great influence of Gandhi. All these theories and influences over Gandhi we would be dealing in the further units, but for this particular unit we would talk about the influence of Bhagavad Gita on Mahatma Gandhi. So within these other influences comes the influence of the Bhakti movement, which also had a great impact on the social and religious reforms initiated by Mahatma Gandhi. He was greatly influenced by Bhakti saints like Kabir, and Sufi sects also guided Mahatma Gandhi's own religious philosophies, as did Tulsidas' idea of formless Rama and various schools within Vaishnavism. Mahatma Gandhi himself practiced Vaishnavism in his personal life. The different schools of Vaishnavism, Mahatma Gandhi was a strong follower of all of them. But it was Bhagavad Gita that influenced Mahatma Gandhi the most. Gandhi names the spirit of Bhagavad Gita as Anasakti Yoga. The word Anasakti Yoga is not to be found in any ancient text on yoga. Patanjali, who is held today as the authority of the ancient school of yoga, does not use the word Anasakti Yoga anywhere. Gandhi, who held the Gita in such a high esteem that it inspired his thought, his work throughout his life. He wanted the message of Gita to reach to the common man, and as a result of his desire, he published Anasakti Yoga. The driving force behind the translation into Gujarati was to give this great work for the benefit of the ordinary people like women, commercial classes, and the downtrodden sections of the Gujarati population. He was a staunch practitioner of this work and says that whatever knowledge he possessed, he wanted to pass it on to the ordinary people of Gujarat. Later, Gandhi even took Swami Anand's suggestion to translate Bhagavad Gita into English sincerely. During his prison term in Yerwada, he undertook this task of translating it into English, which was later completed by his trusted secretary Mahadev Desai. Gandhi also brings out his argument that the main message of Bhagavad Gita is ahimsa or non-violence. He says that if one understands the central teaching of Bhagavad Gita, one is bound to follow truth and ahimsa. So this would be all from these 4 particular units. Thank you all.